So, welcome back to the channel, everyone. It's nice to be back, I would say. We thought today would be the perfect opportunity, since the weather's kind of crappy outside. Winter, or should we say autumn, is very much upon us. We thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to talk about, one of the reasons we're here on Islay, one of our, biggest hobbies, if not interests, and that's this stuff. Whiskey, yeah. I mean, Islay is synonymous with, let's be honest, what some of the world's best whiskies, some of the world's most famous whiskies, attracting people from every corner of the globe to this wee tiny island of the west coast of Scotland. And we thought it'd be a good time, at least for this video, to address, why do people travel all this distance to come and see these whiskies, come and drink them. So we thought we could maybe it's a good excuse to have a couple of drams, take some whiskies from the cabinet and talk you through Islay's whisky distilleries, some of our favourites. But there's 9 distilleries here, so we couldn't do them all, so we thought we'd just stick to these ones. But 9 distilleries, we've got
Laphroaig, Ardbeg, Laphroaig, Bowmore, Caol Ila, Ardnachol, Bunnahabhain, Kilchoman and Bruichladdich. Did I say Bruichladdich last? That's shocking.
I know, shocking.
That's absolutely shocking.
Well done though.
Thank you very much.
9 distilleries, and there's debatably a 3 on the way. So there's a new distillery getting built just outside Portellen at Firkin. There is a new Portellen distillery being built. Portellen was closed in '83, so they're reopening it. And there's been talk of a distillery getting built just outside Port Charlotte.
Yeah.
I don't know all the details on that, but yeah, it's an exciting time to be in the whisky industry. Whisky's never been more popular than it is today.
And that's why we're here. Nice.
Let's get this party started.
Cool. Slange.
Slange for rock.
The first whisky distillery we want to talk about is Bruichladdich, and it's actually Bruichladdich is the reason why we are on Islay in the first place, because after working 5 years in the whisky industry, we've actually both been asked to move to Islay and work for Bruichladdich, which I think is bloody cool.
It's not bad.
Not
for sure. Not too bad for sure.
Not too bad at all, no, not too bad. At the moment, both of us, we are enjoying really nice drams.
Sorry.
Bruichladdich, the classic Laddie.
That's Bruichladdich, like, when you say flagship.
The flagship of the distillery, completely unpeated, and Port Charlotte 10, peated at 40 ppm. Beautiful drams. We both really enjoy both of those whiskies. It's a fantastic core range. The classic Laddie, why do you like it?
Look, classic Laddie is, an outlier and definitely when it comes to Islay whiskies, because we're talking about an unpeated Islay. Even that phrase is quite a big deal in Islay, like unpeated Islay. Look, Bruichladdich is making one of the best unpeated whiskies, not just in Islay but in the world, in my opinion.
Obviously not biased opinion.
Not biased
whatsoever.
at all, but this stuff is delicious. A mix of bourbon and wine casks. It's 50%. It's not got colouring in it. It's not been filtered. It's just, it's an exciting whiskey, and what we would describe ourselves as breakfast whiskey. Easy drinking.
Yeah, nice and citrusy. Nice and sweet, very refreshing, and even though there is Islay barley in the classic Laddie, it's not your typical Islay whiskey because there is no peat involved. And I am enjoying beautiful Port Charlotte 10. If I was to drink one whiskey for the rest of my life, it would be Port Charlotte 10. This is what I call an Islay hag. Nice and warm, barbecue, campfire, nice sweetness from the red wine casks from France, and it's just a really beautiful
dram. I would describe it as the balance between sweet and smoky. Consistently delicious whiskey.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell everyone, what's the history? Why is Bruichladdich making unpeated whiskey first of all, and heavily peated whiskey? What's the history?
Absolutely. So, Bruichladdich is actually the first purposely built distillery on Islay. So, if you've been or you're going to see Laphroaig, Ardbeg, Bowmore, or even Kilchoman, which was established in 2005, what's really common with all those distilleries is that they all started as farms and then started making whiskies. Bruichladdich was straight in there from the very beginning. really high tech, really modern, but sadly it has a really rough history. Since 1881 to 2001, it had many different closures until two guys from London, Mark Rainier and Simon Kochman, bought us over in early 2000s.
And I mean, interesting enough, like through that, like what's 120-year period, nobody thought it'd be a good idea to invest in the Bruichladdich distillery. And Bruichladdich famous for being like progressive Hebridean distillers. Yet when it comes to making the whiskey, you're talking some of the oldest equipment in Scotland. So
yeah, absolutely.
These two guys, like, they had this old equipment, this old distillery, but had, I think, the drive to do something different.
Absolutely. And I think it makes so much sense because they both came from the wine industry. So if any of you is drinking wine, we love wine, terroir and provenance is incredibly important to know. How you grow the ingredients, what's the environment, how does the weather, soil, everything, the ecosystem affects the taste of the certain ingredients. So we were the first people 22 years ago to actually talk about barley that way, and started experimenting with different varieties of barleys. We were the first distillery since Second World War to actually start using Islay barley, which is super, super cool. And more than anything, it was just like question all those things about Scottish industry, about Islay industry as well, because it's actually quite uncommon for Scottish distilleries to use Scottish barley. Most of it comes from England, Poland, Netherlands, Russia, Ukraine. So we wanted to be as local as possible and just make everything on the site as well. So we make the whiskey here, we mature everything on the island, and we bottle everything here as well.
Yeah, I mean, how do you make an Islay whiskey as true to Islay as possible? It's just a simple concept, and I think these guys,
they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they smashed it, right? They don't own the distillery now. We're currently owned by Remy Cointreau, but even that company shares the same kind of ethos, the same goals. So to be fair, I wouldn't say much has changed since they bought us over in 2012. The whiskey is debatably better than it ever was, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know if you think the same.
I agree, yeah.
And you know, I think things are going up for Bruichladdich. I personally think.
Yeah.
Look, we haven't even mentioned one of Bruichladdach's most famous products, you know, the one and only, the most famous
Octomore.
Which is here. Be brief, Roks, what is this?
Octomore, very simple. We use the most peated barley in the world to make the Octomore. Port Charlotte, exactly 40 ppm. Octomore, anything from 80 ppm to 309.1 parts
and I think this one's 133 parts per million phenols. Like, that's how smoky the whiskey is. This is off the scale smoky and off the scale delicious.
Really delicious.
So.
What's really interesting with Octomore is lots of people are so surprised when you try it. When you smell it and you taste it, first is the sweetness. And it's not like a slap in the face with peat. It's just comes in, and it's just a really, really nice and long finish. If you have a chance to try an Octomore, please do. My favorite ones are always 0.3s, and 0.3 are always made with the local barley grown on Octomore farm. And it's just really earthy, very farmy. And this particular bottle has some wines in there as well, so really nice.
Yeah, stunning stuff. So that was our short introduction to Bruichladdich. I promise will not be as long on all the other drams, but for now I think we can just enjoy this and
lunch.
Here's to the next one, Roks. So Roks, I think the next distillery we should talk about is maybe your first love.
Ooh!
Don't know if we can say that.
Are you talking about potentially Laphroaig?
Yeah, Laphroaig.
Nice.
Why don't you tell the story from your own perspective of Laphroaig and why I said it's your first love?
Yes, so when I moved to Scotland in 2014, the first whiskey I've ever tried, Scottish whiskey, was Johnnie Walker. And I was 18, and me being Polish, I just shot it. Obviously, wasn't the best experience. And then I met Callum, and he was trying to impress me, obviously, being a typical Scotsman, and he brought Laphroaig 10, and this was the first whiskey I absolutely fell in love with. I think I've never tasted anything like that before. The one we are having at the moment is cask strength, and it was finally like different flavors, and I think me being Polish as well, growing up in an environment where we love like smoked meats and cheese. I grew up eating lots of those things, and it just kind of reminds me of home, and I think it's a flavor that I'm really, really used to. And it's funny because Laphroaig 10 is usually either a dram you will love or you will hate.
Yeah, I mean, it must be one of those whiskies that, how many times you hear people say, you know, I can't stand Scotch whisky, or, you know, Scotch whisky's way too smoky or too peaty. To be honest, they're talking about this stuff. Like, if you're not a fan of smoke and peat, probably because you've tried this. We're strange, like, this stuff is to die for.
Mm-hmm.
And there you go, Roks.
Thank you.
You can just reminisce about that first time you fell in love with Scotch whisky. Laphroaig is an old distillery. It's one of the oldest in Islay. It was established in 1815. At least that's when it started paying tax. This distillery was probably running a lot longer than that. You know, but it grew in popularity purely based on its, you know, its slap you in the face, smoky character. Like, love it or hate it, this stuff is tasty. It's different. You know when you're drinking a Laphroaig. We're currently drinking one of our favourite expressions of Laphroaig, and that's Laphroaig 10 cask strength. Because let's be honest, if you're going to drink a Laphroaig, you need to drink it cask strength. It needs to be that kind of in your face, slap you in the smoke. Slap you in the smoke? Slap you in the face, peaty, like, you know, like drinking like a bog, like chewing on a piece of dirt. That's Laphroaig for us.
Just give me a muddy drink. It will make me very happy.
So good though.
It's really good.
But this is a distillery that, you know, for a long time was my favourite distillery. Like, one of these distilleries that you would walk into and, you know, your foot would be past the threshold and there'd be a nice guy there or girl and saying, you know, welcome to Laphroaig. Would you like a dram?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you sell a distillery, for me at least.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of warm welcome, and I think Laphroaig for me is that warm welcome.
I think we should talk about Callum's first love.
Bunnahabhain. Yeah, I think it's quite difficult for me to say exactly what the first whiskey, at least. It's definitely impossible for me to say the first whiskey I tried. Like, I was probably teething on this stuff. But I can definitely remember the first whiskey I drank and remember thinking, you know, maybe whiskey's for me. I don't know when the first time I tried whiskey, but I definitely think, you're talking anyway, 16 when I remember trying. I think it would have been Bunnahabhain 12.
That's
and just thinking, you know, this is quite nice, right? This is quite tasty. I was that weird guy, you know, at university, who would bring a bottle of whiskey to a birthday party, and you know, and Bunnahabhain is probably the reason for that. Like, Bunnahabhain is the other unpeated Islay. Just pour a wee bit of this either way. By the end of this video, we're like,
just a wee one,
yeah. Bunnahabhain's the other unpeated Islay. It's again one of the best unpeated whiskies in the world. In terms of like the history of the distillery, it was also established in 1881, just like Bruichladdich, mostly making unpeated whiskey for blenders, similarly to Bruichladdich. But I just remember trying it that first time, probably at the age of 16, and it's this kind of mellow, fruity, but not boring. I don't like to describe any whiskey as boring, but you know, it's bottled at 46%. It's not been filtered. They're not adding caramel colouring. They're using a lot of wine casks, particularly sherry, for Bunnahabhain, and it's just, nice and syrupy, sweet, unpeated, easy-going whiskey.
Yeah.
The whiskey we're drinking right now, you probably know more. You'll be able to pronounce it.
So it's a handfill. If you ever make the Bunnahabhain distillery, honestly, I don't know how many bottles we had of the handfill, just exclusive bottles, and this is this was distilled in 2006, and it's been, I guess, most of the life in Manzanilla bottle, which I'm guessing, I think it's a Spanish wine.
Manzanilla, I think it's a type of sherry.
Type of sherry, yeah, which makes sense. It's 58.6% alcohol, again, cask strength. I think like once you actually get into whiskey, and once you actually try cask strength whiskies, it's really, really hard to come back to the whiskies that are less than 46%. Anyway, for me, and again, you can add that water if you wanted to as well. But what I think is really cool about the guys at Bunnahabhain is that all of them are just so knowledgeable, and if you do a warehouse tasting,
definitely do the warehouse.
Please, we've had so many warehouse tastings with Bunnahabhain. The people who work there are extremely knowledgeable.
Particularly this guy, David Brody.
If you want to learn about sherry, go to Bunnahabhain, because you can learn things that you wouldn't be able to learn maybe as in depth anywhere else, I would say.
I mean, I would say that the distillery itself is located in the most kind of northerly part of Islay. It's not the easiest place to get to. I think we'd have to give the award for the best location in terms of views.
100%.
Because Bunnahabhain is stunning. I mean, you're situated on the sound of Islay, and just across from the distillery, you've got the beautiful Paps of Jura. It's just it's an absolute gem of a distillery. And if you've not tried this stuff,
please do.
Try it.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of Speyside whiskies, of Highland whiskies, of unpeated whiskies, try this. Or even if you're a fan of peated whiskies, try the peated stuff. The peated stuff is really, really good. It's usually labelled under Monye. Just stunning. Stunning whiskey.
And I think it's also a nice option for what you said. If you come over to Islay and maybe you're not a big fan of peat, this is just another really nice option to pop in. Their stuff is just such a beautiful, high quality, and they have options with peat as well. So
definitely
really good stuff.
Thanks, Bunnahabhain.
Thank you.
What do you think, Roks? Kilchoman next?
Kilchoman, yeah. Again, another cool distillery.
Yeah, I mean, Kilchoman is... I can honestly say Kilchoman is the first whiskey that at least I remember buying. You know, actually I brought a predecessor to this particular whiskey we're drinking just now. This is the Kilchoman 100% Islay 12th edition. I bought the first edition.
That's cool.
That was
really
the first
cool.
bottle of whiskey I ever bought. We have bought every single 100% Islay whiskey since they started making it. At least I have. You've been buying them recently.
Yeah.
Look, if you're going to go to Kilchoman, you've got to at least try the 100% Islay.
Islay barley, yeah.
Right, they're the only distillery on Islay that can boast to do everything. Right, so they're growing the barley on Islay, they are malting in Islay, they are distilling in Islay, they're maturing in Islay, and they are bottling on Islay. I mean, that is a big deal.
That is amazing.
Right, I think this year, or last year, 30% of the barley they used was grown on the island, which is...
It's a high percentage, considering there is only 2 distilleries on the island that are using Islay barley, Bruichladdich and Kilchoman. And they were established in 2005, and again we share very similar ethos, trying to make it as local as possible. Kilchoman is the second biggest private employer, but they are the smallest distillery. I'm not sure what's the entire number now, but I believe 45 people?
45 to 50 people, I believe.
Which is really high number as well. And the Islay barley, they malt themselves. So if you want to see how the process of the maltings is done, please go to Kilchoman. And I think most people who come to Islay as well, they're here to see Laphroaig, Lagavulin, maybe Ardbeg. And very often, Kilchoman is the distillery that's kind of
less famous.
But I think people who always try Kilchoman, when they go to the distillery, I think they become big fans, and like, why wouldn't you as well?
Yeah, I would say it's probably, we've done a lot of tours at I mean, I've done them all, I think, apart from maybe Bowmore distillery. Done all the distillery tours. I think Kilchoman probably have one of the best distillery tours, purely because you can see every stage of the production.
Yeah.
So if you're someone that doesn't fully understand how whiskey is made,
This is
maybe Kilchoman is probably the best place to go.
Yeah.
Because you can see every stage of production.
Absolutely.
The one we're drinking right now, the 100% Islay, is always peated to around about 20 parts per million, I believe. And it's a mix of bourbon casks, and I believe there's sherry in there as well.
That is nice.
Good.
Yeah, it's really nice. Again, sweetness and beautiful ashy finish on it as well. What's the strength on this? 46? So, 50%. I like that.
50.
That is good. Really good.
So yeah, it's probably definitely worth a visit at Kilchoman if you're on Islay. So 100% go to Kilchoman, enjoy the dram. They've got a good selection in their little bar section of the visitor centre. So yeah, well done Kilchoman for your 100% Islay.
Good job.
Yeah, stunning whiskey. Let's move on. What we got? I think
Ardbeg 10.
Ardbeg?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Ardbeg, easy peasy whiskey to talk about. Again, probably one of the best whiskies from I would say a standard whiskey from a distillery, like a core range, a cheaper whiskey.
Yeah. You can get it in Tesco sometimes for like £30.
Well,
it used to be the inflation.
Inflation. Yeah, I mean, Ardbeg 10 is it's a whiskey that if you've not tried, you haven't experienced Islay. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I like that.
Ardbeg Distillery must be one of the most famous distilleries in Islay for sure. One of the most popular amongst collectors of whiskey. You know.
Yeah.
You know, for sure. Like this is typical Islay whiskey. This is slap you in the face smoky. This is more towards the Laphroaig side of Islay, the south of Islay. Heavy phenols, like kind of 45 to 55 parts per million.
Yeah, they've also done different expressions called the supernova, where the ppm number was much higher as well.
And they're about to release Hypernova.
Yes, Hypernova 160.
170, I think.
170 ppm. Yeah.
So yeah, they're trying to. I think it's controversial, but I think they're trying to maybe compete with Octomore, who are of that super heavily peated category, but they don't need to. Look,
this is
you've got Ardbeg 10. This is, if we were having a discussion the other day about whiskey you would take to a desert island if you could only have 3 bottles of whiskey. This is one of the whiskies to take to your desert island.
Yeah.
Ardbeg 10 is perfect whiskey. It's actually my favourite expression from Ardbeg. I would go as far to say, right? And we've tried lots of different expressions from Ardbeg, but there's something about the 10 that is just consistently nice.
Yeah, yeah, and really important. They don't add any caramel coloring, and everything is non-chill filtered as well, which is something we always look for in a whiskey as well. And for me, Ardbeg is just hits those perfect peated notes that I'm looking for. I mean, every single one of us have a different definition of what peated whiskey is. For me, I just love this kind of very farmy, really earthy, muddy, almost like dirty flavors.
Yeah.
And Ardbeg just hits that perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, the distillery's been on Islay for a long time. Again, it's the same, similar history to Laphroaig. I don't know Ardbeg's history too well, but you know, it was established in 1815, same as Laphroaig. Fairly recently was closed. I think in the 90s, but Ardbeg was closed and then rebought by no other than Louis Vuitton. You know, fashion brands, just shows you who's into whiskey these days. Ardbeg has been part of that growth, part of that kind of, you know, whiskey boom. Ardbeg has put Scotch whiskey, Islay whiskey back on the map because it's just stunning
super
whiskey.
tasty. And I think what's really important to talk about Ardbeg as well is, this is, well, more things, but when you come into Ardbeg Distillery, the first thing I always remember, since I've been coming to Islay for the last 6 years, is you come in, people are really friendly, and one of the first thing they would always ask is like, would you like a dram? Would you like to try something? And I think that's really, really important. If you come into any distilleries, just this really nice, warm hospitality, and just offering a dram, which I think is really nice. Their merch is really good as well. I'm just like, anytime I come into Ardbeg, I'm like, just try not to buy anything.
Yeah, their merch is pretty nice. It's expensive merch, but it's very good merch.
And for you, your biggest collection is Kilchoman. For me, it's actually Ardbeg. That was one of the first bottles I bought for collection.
Yeah, maybe Bowmore was
Oh,
the first
yeah,
one.
that was the first one, but then it was like
You've got a lot more Ardbegs in the collection.
Yeah, I have more Ardbegs, and it was a couple of times we've opened like the committee releases as well. So, yeah, pretty cool distillery. Next dram. The last dram, but not the least.
No, we're going to go for, I think, quite an unusual last dram. And in fact, it's a whiskey that I know for sure that a lot of folk don't really know exists. And that is a Caol Ila unpeated 15-year-old.
Really interesting. I love this so much.
Yeah, this is, we bought this in auction actually recently after the Whisky Festival here in Islay that our friend Aaron he was working for Diageo at that, and he gave us a taste of some unpeated Caol Ilas, and we thought,
this is really interesting.
yeah, shit, this is good. So I decided, she didn't know anything about it, to buy one of these bottles. I got this one for £65 at auction. The 15 unpeated Caol Ila at cask strength, a whopping 61.5%, but Caol Ila unpeated is really, really interesting whiskey. Tasty whiskey, and Caol Ila is debatably the most underrated Islay whiskey, I would say.
I agree 100%. The first bottle of whiskey that I bought for drinking was back in 2016, 17, and at the time we went to Islay Square and there was a shop
yeah, I remember
that had a bunch of like independent bottlers.
From Hunter Lang.
No, it was Hepburn's Choice.
Yeah, but Hunter Lang was the bottler.
The bottler. And I remember we tried 5 years old, Caol Ila, independent bottler, single cask, Hepburn's Choice. And I remember I bought it for £40 and I was like, £40? £40 for a bottle of whiskey?
So expensive.
And I just remember like loving it so much. Like I think like often when you talk about peated whiskies, I think it's just really interesting how people like to go for older, but in fact if you like peated whiskies, actually younger the better, because this way you don't lose that content of phenols. So like honestly one of the best whiskies I've ever had were like 5 years old, which
It'd
is
be interesting to revisit that whiskey.
if I would like it.
Would you like it? I mean, I remember it being really, really good.
Yeah.
Caol Ila, when was Caol Ila built? I don't have a clue.
1846.
Is it that old? I thought it was built in the 70s.
It was demolished in the 70s.
And then rebuilt.
Yeah, they completely demolished an entire plant and then they built
You never really, like, when I think of Caol Ila, I don't think of this I guess Victoria.
It's older than Bruichladdich.
Yeah, I don't really think of an old distillery.
I know.
Wow. So yeah, you said built in
1846.
1846. Demolished in the 70s.
Yes.
72, was it?
1972. Yeah.
And then rebuilt in sometime in the 70s. Is this?
Yeah.
Actually the biggest distillery in Islay. Biggest distillery in Islay. I think they're producing anything between 6 and 7 million litres a year. Vast quantities, like massive. Give you some context. Bruichladdich, the guys we work for, are producing 1 million litres a year, so that potentially 7 times bigger than Bruichladdich. And most of their spirit is actually going into Roks' first ever Scottish whisky, Johnny Walker Black Label.
Yeah.
Which we tried recently, which, to be honest,
It was nice.
it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Not worth shotting, but yeah, really, really good whiskey. But hey, again, if you can find it, try Caol Ila unpeated. It's just really, really good. And this is owned by Diageo, so it's the biggest drinks company in the world. They own, I think, 38 distilleries in Scotland. They own the maltings here in Islay, but they also own one of the most famous Islay whiskies, Lagavulin. But recently, I would put Caol Ila as a higher favourite of mine than Lagavulin.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, Lagavulin whiskey is really, really good, particularly the Distillers Edition. But unpeated Caol Ila, you can get the 15 or even the 17. It's really, really interesting whiskey.
Yeah. And what I think is really worth mentioning as well, like they've opened a new visitor center as well, and it just have a completely different feel. Like I remember going to Caol Ila and it's just beautiful view, again stunning, and it just kind of had this like quite industrial, ugly feel to it, and
Which is quite nice.
which is really cool. And I just always remember like there was always a cat around the distillery as well.
Yeah, shit, there was a cat around.
But they have this really stunning new visitor center, and I think they opened after like 2 or 3 years of being shut.
Yeah,
I'm not entirely.
Well, they had the pandemic as well. So,
Yeah,
but
pandemic.
it's closed for a while.
And honestly, the new visitor center is absolutely stunning. Really nice view as well, and it almost kind of makes you feel like you're not on Islay. It feels very modern.
Very fancy.
Very fancy. It's just like, I wish I could, go on for like a couple of drinks, maybe have some cocktails. But really nice visitor center. Hopefully we can do a tour at some point. I think that'd be really interesting. But yeah, this is really interesting because it's unpeated. As you said, cask strength. Again, maybe it's just me being Polish. I can't taste the strength as much. Super smooth, really oily, sweet, caramel,
Vanilla, yeah, 100%. But we will leave this as our last dram because I think if we have any more drams, we'll be
Squished.
on the table.
Yeah.
And I think we've mentioned everything apart from maybe one.
Yeah.
What one are we missing?
Bowmore.
Bowmore, yes. Bowmore Distillery, like, it's got to be one of the ones to visit in terms of it's got to be the easiest one to visit because it's in the capital city.
And it's the
of
oldest distillery in Islay as well.
Oldest distillery in Islay, beautiful visitor centre. But when you go to Bowmore, one thing we would recommend is trying their cask strength whiskies. Look, Bowmore at cask strength is some of the best whisky you can drink. At least that's our preference. If you want a whisky that's really easy going and maybe you want a little introduction to Islay whiskies, then by all means try like the Bowmore 12 or the 15 or the 18. But if you want like a whisky that would get you excited as a whisky drinker, is a cask strength Bowmore, like Vaults Edition or any of their limited releases. They're really, really interesting whiskies. I think it's a good way to leave it tonight. What would be nice to hear is from everyone what they would think is their favourite Islay whisky. So if you want to leave a comment below with your favourite Islay whisky, that'd be appreciated. Hey, it would help the algorithm put our video to the top.
Like, comment and subscribe.
Yes, and put a comment. We want to know your favourite Islay whisky, favourite expression, not just distillery, favourite expression.
Yeah.
And if we haven't tried it, we'll give it a bash.
Exactly.
Promise.
So, thank you so much. I think it was just quite a different video for both of us, and I think it just makes me just so excited to talk about whiskey because so far all the videos we posted, it just wasn't much about whiskey. And like both of us, we have
We love
love
whiskey.
whiskey so much. So hope you enjoyed this video, and again, anytime you're on Islay, pop into Bruichladdich, say hi, and yeah, just have a nice chat.
Yeah. So we're going to enjoy this dram, so we can say good night, good morning, good afternoon to wherever you are in the world. So Slanjava.
Slanjava. Na zdrowie.